surprised and, in fact, to a degree even shocked by what we're seeing there, because we've perhaps heard it so many times that we take it for granted and don't really realize what's going on. And I think that one of the most amazing conversations in all of the Old Testament is found in Genesis chapter 18. And it's not of the part of the text that we talk the most about, but there's a conversation that occurs between the representatives of the Lord. As a matter of fact, the Lord is presented when His representatives are present, and so it was on this occasion for Abraham and for Sarai, later Sarah. When God told them that they would be blessed with children, they just couldn't believe it. It was hard for them to believe that that was possible at their age. And as a matter of fact, we're told that Sarah laughed in her own mind, in her own heart. And then the Lord, through these men, asked Abraham, why is Sarah laughing at what we said was going to take place? Sarah said, I didn't laugh. And yes, you did. In your heart, in your mind, you laughed at what God said was going to be. And that was a serious offense. But God is a gracious God. It's not true that God in the Old Testament is a God of vengeance. God in the New Testament is a God of grace. Behold both the goodness and the severity of God, Old Testament and New Testament. And in this same context, as you look into Genesis chapter 18, there's also a conversation about what's next on the agenda of these two men. And these two men are representatives of God. They are angels. And Abraham, as the father of a great nation, and through whom all nations of the earth were going to be blessed, needs to know about this, they said. So the Lord said, we're on a mission here. Sodom and Gomorrah have become so corrupt, they have become so sorry, have rebelled against God's moral laws to such an extent that the cry and the stench of their disobedience has come up to heaven. And God was no longer going to tolerate it, and we're on a mission. As God's representatives, we're going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and many of the cities of the plains. Please don't do that, Abraham says. Would you destroy the righteous along with the wicked? In essence, God says, are there any righteous there? What about if you can find just 50? God says, okay. If 50 can be found, I will spare them all. Abraham wasn't through with his bargaining. And here's what's shocking. He begins a discussion with God, trying to talk him down. How many of you really hate to go car shopping? Boy, I do. I don't like to go car shopping because in most places they expect you to bargain with them and try to get them down. And I just wish they would come up with their lowest price and tell me, now here's what we require, take it or leave it. But God told Abraham what he was going to do. Abraham said, well, what about if there's just 50? And then he brought the number down and down and down and down. And he says, God, I'm just a speck of dust. Please don't destroy me because I'm talking with you about this. But what about eventually just 10? Okay. If 10 can be found, guess what? They couldn't. So these angels went on to Sodom. They were going to stay in the public square, and that was customary in that day, that they would accommodate somewhere in the public square, if there was no inn convenient, that they would accommodate them there, but not in Sodom. They were putting themselves in jeopardy if they were just men by staying in the public square. And so Lot, who was living there, who was called Righteous Lot, he saw the situation. He was sitting in the gate when they came by, and he said, no, don't stay there. Come and stay at my house. And that way it'll be more convenient. You can get up early and go on your journey. And, oh no, we'll just stay in the public square. No, he insisted they come and stay with him. And so eventually they did. Well, when the corrupt and when the morally degenerate people of Sodom saw, here's two fresh people that we haven't known before in a homosexual way. Here they are. Look what's represented. Look what's come our way. And so they come to Lot and says, send those two guys out, that we may know them in a carnal way. No, don't do this. And Lot, who is referred to as Righteous Lot, just shocks me all to pieces when he says, no, don't take them. You see, I've got two daughters. I'd rather you take them. Wow, what's righteous about that? There are some things in Alabama vernacular that just bumfuzzle me, and that bumfuzzles me. I don't understand it. But apparently it was such a sin that Lot could not even begin to deal with the idea of just turning these visitors over to these immoral citizens. And so he says, no, well, they're going to take Lot by force himself. We'll do worse to you than we were going to do to them. But the men reached out, grabbed him, pulled him back into his own house, and closed the door so that they couldn't get to him. And these men, these angels of God, let Lot know what they're going to do. We're going to destroy this city, and so you and anybody else in your family, do you have sons-in-law? Do you have daughters? Do you have a wife? All of them, you need to get them together and get them out of here, because we're going to destroy this city. Please don't do that. But no, these men are on a mission by God. And so these men literally, now the sons-in-law wouldn't listen. As a matter of fact, they thought he has to be kidding. This can't be serious. This can't be true. And so they didn't listen. But Lot, according to the instructions, took Mrs. Lot. By the way, what was her name? We really don't know. But it may have been Iscah. But we're not sure about that. Because Iscah means the observant one, and she's mentioned in another place in Genesis. But we'll just call her Ms. Lot. Mrs. Lot and Lot himself and his two daughters, the angel took them by the hand, and there's an indication, if you read between the lines there, that a certain degree of force might have been involved. He led them out. And the angel said, now whatever you do, don't stop at any of the places in the plain. Now Lot tried to beg off, let us go to this particular place. And at first he did. He was scared to go to the hills. But he led them out and he said, now also, don't look back. And I don't think he was talking about just a glance back. But don't look back at what you're leaving behind. You remember Lot originally had chosen this place because it was prime land. It was a good place. And there were riches there. Now, yes, he was plagued by the immorality that he saw every day. But there was a draw to the greatness of this city, because financially they were having a boom economy. They were in good shape. And don't look back and I wish I could go back. Do you remember that happened later on? Do you remember that happened to the Israelites? They were freed from slavery. They were saved by God, but they looked back. In other words, they longed to go back and have some of the riches they had enjoyed before. Well, they were led out. Fire and brimstone, sulfur and ash was rained down upon those plain cities, including Sodom and Gomorrah. And what did Lot's wife do? She looked back. Exactly. Verse 26 of chapter 19. And his wife looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. Did any of you notice an email that I sent you this morning? Early hours this morning? Now you know what she looks like, don't you? Not really. But some say that's Lot's wife. As a matter of fact, on Mount Sodom, people who live in that area today say that this pillar that somewhat resembles a woman, I suppose, they say that's Mrs. Lot. That's Lot's wife. I don't know that there's any way they can tell that. But we are told that in the southwest area, just southwest of the Dead Sea, there are a lot of pillars like that. And who knows what they originally were? They've been turned to ash. Piles of ash that have simply been burned. Multitudes of them. But whether or not that can be proven, and whether or not God did this through natural means, through some kind of an eruption, we don't know. But we know that God did what He said He would do. And Lot's wife looked back, and she was turned into a pillar of salt. Now again, there's a lot of things we don't know about Lot's wife. We don't know for sure what her name is. It might be that there's something to the idea that her name was Iscah, as a name mentioned in Genesis 11, because it means to observe, to look upon something in a longing way. And she might have been looking back at the land and saying, oh, how I'm going to miss all of that. As corrupt as it was, I'm sure going to miss all of that. And the word look there is more than a glance. It means to look in an observant way. But we don't know for sure what her name was. There's a lot we don't know about her. But you know, there are some things that can be known about Lot's wife, even though we don't know her name. There are a lot of things that we don't know personally about her. Some things can be known. And there's some lessons for us in what took place here. One thing that we can know is God's judgments in the past, this one included, serve as warnings and serve as reminders for us. And Jesus used this story in Luke chapter 17. He told the people, remember Lot's wife. Why? Look what happened to her. When she violated God's will and when she had a desire to go back to the sinful city in which she had enjoyed luxurious living, look at what happened to her and learn a lesson from it. What do we know about Lot's wife? We know she perished even though she was the wife of a righteous man. Now again, I don't understand fully why God declared him to be righteous. He had made all sorts of mistakes in judgment. Some of them were astonishing. Some of them were shocking. But somehow he was described as a righteous man. 2 Peter chapter 2 and verses 7 and 8, the New Testament writer refers back to righteous Lot. What can I learn from that? I can learn from that if you examine him or me or you or anyone else and you look closely enough, you're going to find unrighteousness. Why was he righteous? He was righteous because God declared him to be righteous. Only God can make us righteous. If we could earn the degree of righteousness, we could wear the cap and gown around and be proud of it, but we can't. We are righteous only when God declares us righteousness by the righteousness of His Son, when we are immersed into Him. Now, another lesson spelled out for us is found in the New Testament in 1 Peter. That was in 2 Peter. In 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 17 and 18. And the time has come for judgment to begin at the house of God. Now listen to this. And if it begins first with us, what shall be the end of those who do not obey the gospel? Now, if the righteous one is scarcely saved, where will the ungodly and the sinner appear? Don't you think that the Holy Spirit, through the Apostle Peter, was reminding them to look back? Even righteous Lot, who did so many unrighteous things, if he was just barely spared, what's going to happen to the rest? Well, we see from that Old Testament example. And even the wife of a righteous man wasn't spared because she was married to a righteous fellow. A second thing, she perished even though she was warned of the danger. She was warned, she was told exactly what was going to happen. If you look back here at Genesis 19, in no uncertain terms, she was told it's going to come to pass. When they brought them out, they said, escape for your life. Do not even look behind you or stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains lest you be destroyed. Now, is there a lesson for us? There's some warnings for us too. In John chapter 5, these are the words of Jesus Christ Himself. We can heed them or we can ignore them. We can accept them, learn from them, respond obediently to them, or we can just let them slide. And here's what Jesus said. Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which all that are in the grave shall hear His voice and shall come forth. Those that have done good unto the resurrection of life or righteousness, they that have done evil unto the resurrection of condemnation. Now what's He telling us? He's telling us, you know this day is coming and you must be ready. But we have the same choice that Lot's wife had. We can listen and respond obediently, or we can ignore it. Another thing we know about her, she perished even though she made an effort to be saved. There are those in the religious world today who say, well, now all you got to do is just sincerely try. We're all going in the same direction. We're all striving for the same place. Now that may sound good on the surface, but it will not bear scriptural investigation. She made an effort to be saved, but she was ultimately lost. In verse 26, but his wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. She almost escaped. Someone says, being close doesn't count in very many areas, maybe in horseshoes and in hand grenades, but otherwise it doesn't count just being close. She was close to being saved, being one who escaped, but she perished. Why? Well, she made an effort, but she didn't follow through. She obeyed initially, but she didn't continue her obedience. Do you remember the story in the New Testament in Acts chapters 24, 25, and 26 about Felix and King Agrippa? Felix said, go away for a while. You're scaring me, what you're telling me. He trembled. Go away for a while. When I have a convenient time, I'll call for you. And King Agrippa says, you're almost persuading me to be a Christian. Almost, but lost. She was almost saved, but ultimately lost. Their heart was not in the right place. Where is your heart? She perished even though she committed, as far as we know, I don't know of any others, she committed, as far as I know, only one sin. We tend to categorize sins. categorize them by size and by the amount of harm that is done in the transgression. And the result is, when we sin, we tend to repent of the big ones and let the little ones slide. And which ones do I consider to be the little ones? Of course, those are mine. Yours are the big ones. Hers seemed to be just a little thing. What are we told in the text she did? She looked back. Big sin, small sin, it's all dangerous and puts us in line for the judgment of God. The end result? Well, in James 1, verses 13 through 15, let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. God cannot be tempted with evil, neither does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own devices, by his own desires, and enticed. Then when one's desire has conceived, it brings forth the birth of sin. And sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. When she was turned into a pillar of sulfur, when she was turned into a pillar of salt, she was gone. She learned the lesson the hard way. Like Moses, when he struck the rock and tried to take credit for himself. Like Achan, I just want that one garment. I can't see how that would hurt anything, that one little garment. But willful sin, rebellion against God, brings death. Something else quickly that we know about her. She perished because she was lacking in faith. Saving faith is obedient faith. The faith of Lot's wife was there in the beginning, and then it wavered. And in Romans chapter 4, and verses 19 through 22, we're told about Abraham that he wasn't altogether strong in his faith at first, but once he developed faith that God's promise was sure, he would not turn away from it. And James says, faith that doesn't obey is dead. Just like the body without the spirit still within it is dead, so faith without works is dead also. And so we are compelled to be obedient to God. And we learned that from Mrs. Lot. We learned that from Lot's wife. Most of the people, if not all in this room today, are Christians. You've turned away from the world and turned to Christ, looking to Him for salvation. But do you ever look back longingly? Do you look back longingly to what the world has to offer? God tempts us to do that. We've all at one time or another been guilty of that. Let us put and focus our eyes upon Christ, the rewarder of our faith, so that we'll not be turned away. If today you need to turn to Him for salvation, if you need to come back to Him and rededicate your life, why not come and do that as together we stand and sing?